Do you suffer from stress, anxiety, or depression? Do you find it hard to focus or to contain your emotions? Any of these things can take you down. So, what then are your personal health practices? If you don't yet have an integral or holistic wellness practice, you're in the right place. Podcast host Susan Axelrod, the confidence coach, has been practicing holistic wellness for 25 years. Along the way, Qigong and Tai Chi found her. After tiptoeing in, she dove into a committed practice and became a teacher and integral wellness consultant. She'll tell you Qigong and Tai Chi changed her life. In this podcast, she interviews practitioners, inviting them to share their stories about how these practices changed their lives too. Go grab your journal. At the top of a clean page, write down, "I want to feel better." Then take a breath and tune in to see if Qigong and Tai Chi can help. Hello, friends. Welcome to a special episode of this podcast series. You met my guest, Josie Weaver, previously in a beautiful conversation we had about how Qigong and Tai Chi changed her life. During that conversation, or perhaps after the meeting, as we call it, I discovered that she teaches Qigong in Spanish to Spanish-speaking people. And I have had an interest in this for a very long time. And I asked if she would be willing to have a discussion about this in another podcast episode. That's what we're doing today. So before we get started, I want to just read Josie's bio to remind you who she is and how powerful she is before we get started. Josie Weaver is a dedicated teacher of mind-body practice with multiple certifications in Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, and bodywork. She teaches mind-body arts in medical settings and leads public classes in Spanish and English in the San Francisco Bay Area and online. Josie is past president of the Healer Within Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to mind-body education and training, and has served on the board of the Qigong Institute. Josie invites you to pursue your desire for healing and optimal health as your unique and powerful road to growth and transformation in all phases of life. Yes, let's do that. Oh gosh, Josie, I want to really thank you for taking the time again to have this conversation with us today. This is an area of personal interest to me. I'm not sure, to tell you the truth, I don't know where it came from, but teaching modalities in Spanish to Spanish-speaking people, of whom there are very many in our own country, is absolutely vital for the well-being of our entire future. And so we talked a little bit about doing this, and you sent me a few of your thoughts, and I wanted to just start by reading something that you shared with me, and perhaps we could start from there, okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, great. So the idea is about a concept called uptake.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of uptake is, how do you get it? What is the nature of uptake by real people in real communities?
Mm-hmm.
And how important the concept of health, of whole person health, is. Sharing these practices and ideas in a culturally sensitive way has a greater chance of increasing uptake, which can mean retaining patients in a study or a program and getting the patients to adopt health methods and ideas so that they practice at home and obtain long-term benefit. This is like the basis of what I'm talking about, which is why I was so intrigued by your teaching in Spanish to Spanish-speaking people. So where do you want to go from here, Josie?
Oh, thank you, Susan. It's great to be here and to talk about this subject, because it really speaks to the practices as belonging to the world, right? So it's not like they belong to one person or one school or one country, but it's really for everybody. And that concept of uptake. So there's a couple of ideas in there that I want to call out. So uptake is a really is a scientific term, science where these things are studied. So things like health promotion, right? So exercise, diet, sleep, all that great stuff. So we have the information, and implementation science is a discipline where we, or I say we, where researchers actually take a look at how are people actually taking up the practices as a life-changing thing. So people can get that great recommendation from their doctor and have that be good motivation to do it, right? Some people, like yourself, I'm imagining you've come to these practices on your own. This is something that you're drawn to. But then there's these communities, Spanish speaking communities, especially in the United States, where health information, health promotion activities, and so forth can be hard to get to through to this community, right? So this is where, what if we taught in Spanish? What if we brought the practices to this community in a different way? And I've had some experience with that, in the sense of first saying, no, I'm not going to do that, or I don't know. I teach in English, and I grew up speaking Spanish, but it was, at home, informal. I studied Spanish a little bit formally, read in Spanish, did all this, but never worked in Spanish, never did anything official.
Wow.
And yeah, I know. So it was kind of a leap to do that. But then it was for all those reasons, right? For the uptake, right? For that increasing that possibility that somebody could take these practices, use them, make them their own, and then over time, just see the outcome, see that it changes things. Okay, so this is like a very powerful tool, right? So Qigong, Tai Chi, mind body practice, it changes people's lives, right? It changes people's lives. And I think that's one of the messages in the series that you're doing. But then our job as practitioners is to ask ourselves, right? Are people actually taking the practice up? Just ask innocently, right? I mean, we make our offering with love, with kindness, but then we need to ask ourselves, are people doing it? Are people taking this in? And one of the things that we notice is, are people's lives changing? Okay, so this is like really important. But then when we offer it in Spanish, there's this kind of a thing that I had to do personally just to be able to teach in Spanish. So I had to make my cheat sheet, right, of how to map concepts, these Taoist concepts, these concepts that I learned termed in English, and translate them, for myself. So I made that, and this is a lot of work in terms of like thinking about practice, and then thinking about how practice is perceived by others. How is it out in the world? This is all really great questions for any practitioner
Yeah.
to really think.
This
Any
is so
teacher,
good.
right? Any
Yeah.
teacher is going to benefit from that. So to put yourself in this place where, like, where, and I keep doing this gesture of like coming over to this other side, take a walk in somebody else's shoes. And this is what the journey is, right? So you make your cheat sheet, and then of course then you try it out. And there was an element of ramping up, but then there was the classes, right? And so to actually teach in Spanish and to have people laughing, right? To have people at ease, to have people go, oh, I know what you're talking about. And suddenly the thing that was a barrier, right? So the language, the communication starts to fall away. Now I teach in Spanish in medical settings. So there was this extra little barrier, right? The whole medical scene. And there, in fact, in one of the places, well, actually, I teach in 2 pain centers, and there are translators, there are interpreters, full-time working. So I've had people translate my classes live, right? Like, wow, okay. And learned a lot from them. But what I learned is that there's something called medical Spanish, right?
Oh,
Yeah, I
we're,
know.
we're in layers now. Layers
That's
deep.
right.
Yeah.
So we're thinking about, like, there's Qigong Spanish, right? Okay,
Right.
so there's all the translation, your vocabulary, your concepts, and how do you hold your language, your concepts, and then there's how do you hold the medical terms, in Spanish, and then what are the things you can do in Spanish that you can't do in English? there's a little area in the Venn diagram where you're like, oh, you can't do that. So I'll give you a little example. The term little actually is something that it's the diminutive in Spanish, right? So you can say little or very little or really tiny, right? And you just keep changing the word. So the word is poco, right? That's little. Then you say poquito, which you may have heard.
Yeah.
And then you say poquitito, right? So it starts getting more and more endearing, maybe, right?
Yeah. Granular.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or just more approachable, more friendly, more kind. And so this is some of the ways you can bring the practices in that can make all the difference for somebody who doesn't know the language, who might be frightened, who might actually not know how to ask questions, not be empowered in that way. So, if that's the case in a medical setting, of course, people are not going to follow the advice, right? If they're intimidated, they're scared, they don't understand. So suddenly you're going to bring this in this fresh, new, unintimidating way. And now that's what really is going to capture the practices for people. And then they go, oh, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I could just breathe. Really? That's it. And you're like, yeah, that's what we're talking about here. And then it becomes more, more grounded. And then you start seeing changing lives. And that's really been the gratifying thing, where people really experience the practices in this very pure way, if it's in their language, in their mother tongue,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all.
What we know is our mutual friend Linda Larkey is one of the people who has done lots of research in this area, and I'm sure you know many. You've been in the industry a long time, but there's no question anymore. There's no question. It's researched, actual science, proven method to create a sort of more healed inner being. To work your joints a little bit, to what they call motion is lotion, move your body smoothly. The breathing, without a doubt, balances the nervous system. There's all these things. We could go on and on about all the impacts. And now we're really offering all these proven methods to this group of people who speak Spanish, in a way that they can receive. Like I was writing, I had to get my second piece of paper. I was writing the progression of what you were talking of, how you shared it with us, which I love the way you spoke that out, because anybody listening to this conversation can adapt it to whatever audience, market, demographic, population group to whom they want to speak, including young people.
Yeah.
In the same way that you just spoke it out to us. But this is so deep, really, and we haven't even gone deep, but you said you made a cheat sheet, you thought about the process, you wrote it out, then you thought about the concepts, then you had to translate them, then you asked yourself, how will I, or how do I translate them in a way that my students can hear? This could be applied to all different groups.
Yes, amazing. Exactly.
It's so good. And then you said you had to practice. You had to practice to create a smooth presentation so that that you can confidently teach in a way that your students broke through the barriers and get people laughing, where they can really receive. And then we have this much higher level, which is medical terminology and medical Spanish. And then you shared with us the entire medical setting, where people are already, if people are in a medical setting, de facto, they're already nervous. Yes. Right? They're already nervous, or they're already energetically a little, blocked because they're nervous for whatever reason they're there. I love this so much. And also, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about your students and the uptake. I didn't know there was something called implementation science. So I have to now, that's like speaking my language. So, but I wanted to ask you, how do you see, you said, how are people taking up or taking in the practices to integrate them into their lives. So can you speak to your students, what they say to you, what they share with you, what you see, feel, or observe?
Yes. Oh, great. These are little mini healing stories, right? So I get a lot of surprise. People say, I didn't know I could do this. I didn't know this was a practice, as if they've already been doing something very
Yeah.
similar. Okay, so this is very important to catch, to kind of realize that we're interfacing with spiritual practice, with prayer, with getting quiet, with the blues, singing, singing songs, So it's very important to see that little connection being made, and I see that like, oh, people are, I didn't realize this is what my doctor wants me to do. And yeah, this is what we want you to do. And
Yeah.
so that, yeah, that little connection being made, really, really important. But then there's this other thing that happens, Susan, that I really want to encourage, all teachers listening or all practitioners, or maybe people who take up practice of any kind, right? That's what I mean by practitioner, right? So if you play these practices, if you do it, sometimes you don't always get the feedback
Yeah.
that they're working on you, right? But they are, right? So what happens is these people, and this is really great, right? And we're going to see this in any language. Their faces literally get smoother, all right? Yeah, so they're doing this. Oh, the wrinkles. This, right? And it's
Yes.
just,
Yes.
whoa.
Of course I know.
That face. I make that face. I've done that face. You can live with that face. But then, suddenly this changes the demeanor, the visage, the literal muscles in the face. And this is really key. If we go back to the layers underneath, the muscles of the face are controlled by cranial nerves, right? So cranial nerves directly connected to the brain. And in fact, cranial nerve, was it 10, right? That's the vagus nerve, right? Of course.
Of
That's going to
course.
be your social stuff. So what I love about the face and noticing the face, okay, and noticing changes in the face, is it's what Stephen Porges, the developer of polyvagal theory, calls, this is your polygraph, right? This is you know, this is for the world, for all to see. And
Wow.
yeah, and so you're going to see like this is the evidence of the vagal activity happening, the self-soothing, the calming, the states of, it's not just relaxation but also safety, right? And it's when we're feeling safe that now we can be social. Now it's like we have our face, we can smile, we're available, for that. And that's what I see changing in the Spanish speakers, right? So it's just suddenly, oh, come in, sit down, have tea. Is that sort of, even though we're not saying that exactly, but that's kind of what we're doing, right? And
Right.
yeah, and then it speaks to that bigger part and what's happening in our society. I know this is an apolitical space, but we have our moments of division, polarization, and what we call othering, right? So people getting othered for not speaking the language or not speaking very well, and this is those messages that we can give to entire communities that you're not welcome. But then if we speak the language or we try to make that connection, even have that intent, suddenly we are now renegotiating those conditions, renegotiating those boundaries. And it can be very powerful, right? This little activity that we're doing, this one little class, this one experience with a couple people, 10 people, 20 people, whatever, in a class, and that suddenly that becomes part of this wave, right? This wave in history that changes things. And that's what I ultimately feel, that that's what we're doing here. Just, okay.
I mean,
It's
Josie, this
yeah,
isn't, we don't apologize to say this is an apolitical space. This is a moral space. This is a
that's the way to
moral
think about
space.
it.
This
Yeah.
is a moral space. So othering is not political, it's moral.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not, there's no question about that for me. And that's part of why I loved this, and again, it's kind of strange how this came up to me. I used to do the jewelry sales where you have teams and whatever that's called, multi-level something marketing. And this goes back many, many years, and I don't speak Spanish. but I had energy. This was even before my energy came in, but now I realize I had energy on this topic. And I was actively seeking speaking people to create teams, ostensibly to sell jewelry and make money, right? And I had two different people, and they didn't want to. They refused to. But anyway, so that's why I think I resonated with this so deeply when it happened to come up in conversation. Perhaps because I read it in your bio. No, this is including. It's inclusive. It's welcoming, inviting. And that's where we are. That is the basis of the energy space.
Yes.
Right.
And like you said,
right. And so when you say, I could feel it, when you just said and shared and described, I could feel it. And this is what I hope people watching this or listening to us could feel, the energy of what it might feel like to walk in and be included, and in your own language. Perhaps even if your language is English, perhaps there's cultural things that you might have translated, like you said. Young people, you have to speak to them the way you speak to young people, or people with cultural backgrounds, or whatever it is. Then we can all join the big energy field of good.
Yes. And yes, and that's what we want, right? Ultimately, this is what the teachers are doing. This is what drew us to teach the practices, to share them. Is in a way, I think we've talked about having personal practice. What we're doing when we teach is share. We are sharing our personal practice with others. And so, to imagine opening your arms and just inviting others into that welcoming space, that moral space, and to say, this is where we're going to observe chaos, recognize chaos, acknowledge chaos, but also still believe in the moral, the true, the honest, the good, that's in people inherently. So, this is what we're teaching. And then the language can kind of be this door. It doesn't have to be the be all and end all, but we are standing in silence with our arms. Nobody's saying a word, and we are really
Yeah.
that's right. We are really connected, and then there's no need for language anymore. We've arrived.
This is interesting, because what's coming up for me, this is like, now we're really granular. What's coming up is, of course, we know in Qigong or in Tai Chi, you don't have to speak. We know there's plenty of practices whereby you show and the person follows. You lead and the person follows, right? They can see what you're doing. And for the people who are listening, I'm doing a little hand
Just
movement,
a little
which is easy, harmonize yin and yang. And somebody could see me and follow me, right? Then eventually we know action leads to energy. They could learn more, do more, feel more, get more, receive more, and be more in it. However, it is helpful to hear what you're doing, to hear what you talked about, the concepts, right? So that's the space that you're in. You're to break through more quickly, and also to get them even to walk into a room, so to speak, like you said, if it's a medical setting. But even, I'm Spanish speaking. I go into the community center, and everybody else, no one else there is like me, and I'm not going to go into that room. And so that's why we're basically calling this right out.
Yeah.
We're just
and just like, are we willing to make an effort?
Right.
And do as as a teacher I know says, mind body arts, reach for the connection, actually create it, right? And go, we're gonna reach for you, and then something's going to be communicated in that whole gesture, right? Oh, you're making an effort, you care, even if your Spanish is not that great, right? Or whatever, even if you got something wrong. It's more like, oh, you're making an effort, you're coming to me, you're reaching. And that gesture alone, can really make that difference for someone, and just put them in that space of receptivity, availability, where they can uptake a practice that they wouldn't have otherwise. So that,
That's
yeah.
so right. Now, there is a Tai Chi move where you actually do reach and grab, but I can't remember the name of it because I remember the energy and the
Mhm.
movements. I don't remember the names. So,
Oh, yeah, and that's how that
but
is,
anyway,
right? Yeah.
yes. So to people who may be listening and not viewing, when Josie said reaching out and inviting in, she put her hand out in front of her and she grabbed, and that is one of our Tai Chi moves where you put your hand out in front and grab and bring it in. Yeah, wow, I'm really getting deep resonance on this for anybody teaching in any language to welcome in all groups. And I hope that people will extrapolate our conversation. But I also hope that there are other Spanish, you even said, I did like that distinction that you made. Well, I grew up, I knew Spanish, I could pretty much communicate in Spanish, but it was more informal, but you
Yes.
never worked in it.
That's right. That's right.
And that's a very interesting distinction because you had to commit, you had to make a choice and commit to do this. And then when you did, how many years did it take you to go through this practice from the time you said, I'm going to do this?
Well, it's interesting is to get the invitation first to do it. So Linda Larkey, who actually worked a lot with communities in Arizona, right, looking for what she called the promotoras, right, the promoters of health, right, and they were mostly women, but they were like, who's available, right? And so, God, Linda talked to me about that ages ago, but then she invited me to teach this group, right, and just like, let's do this, and you make some videos, and you can meet. And I don't know, I think it took about a good year and a half maybe of doing a little hemming and hawing and but I had Linda's encouragement. She says, you know what, you're going to also trust that as a practitioner, as somebody who studies this stuff, it's going to come through you also, that you're going to reach back to the ancestors or whatever it is and do that. And that's going to be a great moment, she said. So it was this beautiful encouragement. But in terms of time, it was a commitment to do that. It was a commitment to, make my cheat sheets and, make my notes and, just, it was really, really powerful. And, if people want to have access to my cheat sheet, I'm really happy to share that as well.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's so good. I love that you were invited.
Yes.
Someone invited you. And then Linda, you were encouraged. She encouraged you. You had to believe in yourself and then also trust that it would come through. This is not easy. This takes confidence. I'm a confidence coach. So I hear
Yes.
through the lens of that and the filter. I always see it. I know it when I see it. And it still took you a very long time by any stretch of the imagination. Now, because we're having this conversation, now you've shared an amazing resource. Somebody else, that process could be entirely truncated because we're having this conversation and hoping with the intention, not hoping, with the intention and commitment that there will be other Spanish speaking people who want to teach Qigong or Tai Chi in Spanish to edify and, grow out the energy field. And that's what I hope. That's my intention. That's what we're inviting people. We're inviting people to do it. Now you have two people here who could encourage you to do it.
That's right. And just that little bit of encouragement, that little invitation, this little, have you thought of offering this way? Just wow. And it really speaks to this thing that's been happening since I started practicing, is that and teaching officially and making a living out of this stuff. And just is that Qigong, Tai Chi, energy practices are going to use everything in your life. Every training, every talent, every ability, even your flaws get used when you teach. And it's thrilling. It's thrilling, but it's also, like you said, it's this little trial that's going to just bump your confidence up a little bit more, because now you can actually rely on those skills, those abilities, those experiences, that history. And I feel like teaching in Spanish really kind of helped me come back to the childhood, great things in childhood, but also like maybe the not so great things in childhood, and use those in
Discomfort,
that's right. Yeah.
unfamiliarity, worried about not getting something right.
Right.
If you forgive me for saying, Josie, we're a little bit in our crone years. We're not so much about like, if I don't get it right, I know I'm not going to die. But in those days, when you feel that feeling, you got to get it right. It's got to be right. You shouldn't do it if you're going to get it wrong. Those kinds of things, that discomfort, it's vital to break through that and realize the way I look at that, Josie, is I dare I say it's almost withholding. You are withholding if you could just break through a little bit and do something a little uncomfortable and get there a little sooner, then you're giving, you're sharing, and there's of course this reciprocal, synergy of receiving. But yeah, you're withholding this practice from so many other people who really inarguably need it, as every
Yeah.
human does. Yeah.
And even your personal stories, like the stories that were, just related, oh, the grandma, the grandfather, whatever, in Spanish, and just
Abuela,
being able to, yes,
the
right, the
abuela.
abuela, like what happened, and just using gestures from the family, and then just like surprising people with that, just your own personal story, and that's just like, whoa, that's going to be this great way to just connect, reach for that connection, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, being
Yes,
Jewish,
absolutely.
I have this myself. If I were going to intentionally, knowingly be working with a Jewish group, I would be invoking kugel or potato latkes,
That's right.
my buddy
Yes.
instead of my abuela,
Right.
something like that. So yeah, I really do get that and understand that. Having this vision right in front of my eyes, it's very palpable. It's very clear. I'm seeing, I'm literally, it's a vision that's happening in front of my eyes. I'm
Mm.
seeing in Spanish speaking neighborhoods, I'm seeing Qigong and Tai Chi in the streets. I think we're having a big impact here, Josie, and I want to say thank you so much for the energy you bring to this room, for taking your time again, for making these generous offers, for first of all breaking through your own confidence barriers and doing this. And if there's anything I can do to support you in any way, of course, you just call on me. I want to end this discussion by something that you said right in the beginning, which was that when you started, the people said, "Oh, I'm doing this already." Right? You said they had this sense of, "Oh, this is a practice, but
Mhm.
I do this." But I'm doing this. And this is the most important thing, that we can open people's minds to understand. A lot of things they're already doing are the thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Right.
Yeah,
Because it's like bring that home even more. It's say this is so ordinary and so fantastic that you might not even notice, right? You might not notice it. Yes.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, this is so good. Thank you so much, Josie. I will look forward to more conversations, slicing and dicing any way you want. Come back to the room and we'll do it.
Thank you, Suzanne. And thank you everyone for listening. This has been a
Yeah.
great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be putting your website in the show notes, so no worries about that. People will know how to get in touch with you, okay?
Fantastic. All
All
right.
right.
Thank you.
All right. See you soon.